Hello. Just want to take a quick minute, just say thank you for all the support around my new book, It's My Turn Now. As we move into the holiday season, we'll be happy to personally autograph a copy for you. You know, what better gift in a way of acknowledging the caregiver, the person who's taking care of our loved ones, the person who's making the sacrifices. So let's give them something to support them. And again, this book, It's My Turn Now, has gotten such great reviews that we just say thank you. Just thank you to everyone who's utilizing it and just benefiting from it. I thank you, my mother thanks you, my brother, my sister, the whole family just say thank you for believing in our story and seeing how our experiences can help so many people. We have to have the order in before December the 15th to make sure that this book is sitting under your Christmas tree.
Good evening. I'd first like to thank God, the Board of Governors, WFMY, the local foundations who have supported us, Welfare Reform Liaison Project staff who nominated me, and our Board of Directors, my family, my lovely wife Beverly, Calvin, Tecumseh, and Adrian, my Mount Zion Baptist Church family and the whole faith community who's been a big part of this, my senior pastor and mentor and co-founder of Welfare Reform Liaison Project, Bishop George W. Brooks, and Mr. Neil Belenke of the United Way, who's just really helped us when we needed help. And a special thanks goes to a special lady, my mother, Miss Odell Cleveland. She found herself a divorced mother with 4 children and a limited education. While working a full-time job and going to school at night to get her GED, the stress and pressure of life caused her to have a massive stroke at the age of 25. As she was lingering there, dying, not knowing if she's going to live or not, as I understand it as a child, she asked God to allow her to raise her children. And through that, she raised us to have faith in God, credibility, a work ethic, and to always look back and help others. All of her children graduated 4-year institution. My mother got her GED, and she went back and got her 4-year degree from the College of Charleston. Mommy, tonight, they're giving me an award for helping others. But the real award goes to you. I hope that this night is what you and God had in mind when you ask him to spare your life to raise your children. Because the real award for me is that God has blessed us to allow you to live, to be the mother that you are. Thank you.
You know, sometime when someone look at a presentation like to those who care, you think to yourself, well, this person has done well and it's been easy, or this person hasn't made. But that's not always the case. Usually for anyone to get to a certain point of any kind of achievement, it's so many people who have helped them along the way. In my case in particular, I could talk a little bit about my background, all the struggles that my family went through. I think back that a lot of times you hear that people were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Well, not me. On May the 6th, 1960, I was born to Calvin Odell Cleveland Sr. and Linda Adams Cleveland in Greenville, South Carolina. My mother found herself divorced with 4 children, and we moved to Charleston, South Carolina with our grandparents. Charleston, South Carolina, and all the beautifulness of Charleston. But I saw it from a different perspective. We lived in the projects in Charleston, South Carolina. Right up the street from the historic Battery, we would go downtown to fish at the Battery, and we'd just play on all the different monuments. Little did I know at the time that all those monuments meant something. We would go and to Colonial Lake. Colonial Lake was just always beautiful. We would go there and we would fish all day. A lot of those fish we would catch were probably too small to keep, but we kept them anyway. Then one day I remember that my mother got sick.
Or living on what they call the project then. There was one day that Mommy was not feeling well. She had a headache and she went to lay down. And then she called me in there and she asked me to bite her fingers because they didn't feel right. And when she did that, that scared me. So after she did that, I called my grandparents, Mother Reese and Papa T, and said that Mommy's not feeling good, and she asked me to bite her finger to see if she could feel it. So then at that point, they came over.
I went to the hospital February 10th, 68, because it was just me and my 4 children. My oldest daughter, Glenda, called her grandparents. They came to get me and they saw something was badly wrong, but they didn't know what it was. Therefore, they took me to the hospital this Saturday. Got to the hospital, they could see something was wrong with me, but they said I had temporary paralysis, so they sent me back home. And to come to their clinic on a Tuesday. I had insurance, but nobody asked me did I have insurance. They sent me home with no medicine, just sent me home, come back to the clinic Tuesday, because that was a teaching hospital. My parents saw I wasn't getting any better. Monday, my mother decided to call her doctor in. He came to the house and looked at me and said, just lift my hand and said, stroke. I know it is. I've seen what I've seen today. You take her back to the hospital. They did take me back to the hospital. The doctor were not that glad to see me come back, because they said the one that was working Saturdays, I told her to come to clinic Tuesday. What's she doing back out here today? But they kept me in there. I went in February the 12th, and I got out around Easter of that year. I don't remember what day, but I think it was close to 2 months in there. And they did find out that I was stroke, but because I was just such a young woman, 25 years old, that's what made it so hard for them to discover.
Now, when my mother was in there for about 3 or 4 months, what I overheard the family members saying is that, if she doesn't make it, what's going to happen to the children? Selected was my baby sister, who was beautiful. She looked like a baby doll. Second was my oldest sister, who was always very attractive, smart, quiet, and never caused any problems. Third was my youngest brother, who was like my oldest sister, quiet and did not get in trouble. Then there was me. I understand that there was additional conversation concerning who would take me.
I had 4 children. The youngest one was, I think, about 16 months, and my oldest one was 8. So one sister, that's when I was in the hospital, they agreed what they would do with the children. My oldest sister would take 2. In fact, they wanted everybody. It was somebody who wanted everybody but Odell, because he was so devilish bad to them. In school, he had so many problems, and he wouldn't listen. Hard-headed like he is today.
I never knew who selected me or who would have been stuck with me, but thanks to God that at the same time that conversation was happening among our family members, my mother and God was having this conversation. And my mother asked God, please allow me to live long enough to raise my 4 children.
I had 4 children, and I've seen what happened to children that don't have a parent. And I was going to fight as long and as hard as I can, and that's what I did. That was my greatest wish. I developed pneumonia in the hospital. At that time, I couldn't even tell you my name. I really feel that's one of the reasons I live, because I wanted to live, because I was sick enough to die. And sometimes just the desire will keep a person here. I went through a religious experience, and I got better. I got better, but I still was handicapped. I had lost the use of the arm and the leg. So I can thank God for a lot of stuff, and even more, because it could have been worse.
I also remember the fact that we were able to go and see her one day in the hospital, and I remember them bringing her down, and she was in a wheelchair. But interesting enough, this lady in the wheelchair didn't look like my mother, didn't even recognize her. We finally recognized my mother when she smiled. And just that smile as children, we ran up and we hugged her. And at the time, we didn't notice the fact that she was paralyzed on her left side because she had a blanket covering her left side. All we noticed was our mother.
Well, it was good for me to see the children, but some of the children didn't even know who I was. Well, naturally, that hurt. Because I didn't want to be there in the first place. And I wasn't the best person to work with because I just wanted to get out of there and talk to him every day about going home.
You know, when my mother got ill, it just affected me a lot. It made us move from a stable household that we were aware of and we were comfortable with, and we moved in with our grandparents. You know, I moved around to 5 different schools in 5 different years. I was in elementary school. I used to get in trouble all the time, and the school teacher and the principals wanted to put me in special ed class. And in those days, we call it the trailer. And, you know, my mother said, no, we're not going to put him in a special ed class. And they said, well, if he doesn't accept this assignment to go into special ed, we're going to put him out of school. So they put me out of school, and my mother kept challenging them. Well, to get me back in school, I had to go and see a doctor. In those days, we call him a shrink. And I could just remember them putting all these different color probes all over my head, and he asking me all those questions. And it's just, the room was just so cold. And, you know, we went through that, and he got his report, and he reported back to the school, and, you know, they said, well, nothing's wrong with him. He's just going through some serious issues as a child, all the changes. And, you know, you think about all the poor black kids in the early 70s that was put in special ed class that didn't have a poor black mother who walked with a brace on her leg and a cane, and who would be willing to walk 2 miles to go down and challenge a school system that said, we're going to put your son in special ed. And she said, no, we're not.
Well, they knew he could do good work if he would do it, at least this teacher, that's what she said. But she didn't want him in her classroom. So, but Odell was one of the lucky ones, because the black kids in her class, they end up in special ed. They didn't have it. She just sent them in special ed. And if you didn't go down there and get them out, you know, go down there and stop her, that's where the child stayed. Nisa that lived behind us, she ended up in special ed. Because nobody went down there to check on it or stop it. But that was typical back then of the kind of teachers who, the white teachers, they didn't want black boys in their class.
I just remember that you were really, you just started doing, I would say they call it acting out now, but I guess you were just, I used to worry about you, because looked like to me, you just, things just kept happening. Things was happening with the schooling. You was having problem at the schools. You was having problem with the neighbors' children. You know, it's just, I said, well, wow, if things don't straighten up, he's going to jail. He going to end up in jail. And around about that time, you discovered basketball, the basketball discovered you. And you made a 180-degree turn just from that basketball.
You know, a lot has been made about basketball really helped change Odell's life around. And I agree, basketball did change my life. But a lot of times people don't really understand how I started to play basketball. Way back there is a creek, or like people would say, you know, we used to go fishing and crabbing a lot. And a lot of people in the neighborhood would go fishing and crabbing, and that was fine. But you're never supposed to go swimming. A couple young kids in the neighborhood over the years has drowned swimming. So when we would come back from swimming, we would come to the place over there, which was the rec center, and we would always take water and put water on our faces so that we wouldn't look ashy, so people would know that we even looked like we were swimming or smelled like we were swimming. And then one day I decided to come out here and play basketball. The only reason why I came out here and started playing basketball on this very court is so I could sweat. In that way, that would disguise the ashiness of swimming, the smell of the creek water that we were swimming,
And little did I know that being out here, being barefooted, playing basketball on this surface, and learning how to play made all the difference in the world. It's interesting. In the early days, they would call me the wild man because I would just get rebounds all the time. Didn't really know how to play, but I knew how to get rebounds. Because of basketball, it appeared that my behavior started to change. Now, all of a sudden, Odell wasn't the menace of the neighborhood anymore. People were actually talking about Odell, the basketball player, and all the notoriety that came along with that. Well, that led to high school and junior varsity basketball. I was able to go to Middleton High School and play for the coach, Jerry Waters. In those days, Middleton High School was just like a pheon, and Coach Waters was almost a living legend, similar to the Bobby Knight of those eras. Played Middleton basketball, we won, state championship, and we went on, and just the whole thing of being in the newspaper, being on television, all that was just positive. And for someone who was in my situation, that felt good. At University of South Carolina, Spartanburg, we were blessed to win the NAIA National Championship there, the first school in the university system to win a national championship. And I remember going to Columbia, South Carolina, and they took us into the Capitol. The rebel flag was flying on top of the Capitol, but we were inside the chambers of the Capitol, and they lined us up in front of it and did a proclamation and told us just how proud we were. During that summer, I was home making the transition, and I met this young lady by the name of Beverly Richardson. I met her at the Holiday Inn rooftop down there. Someone was telling me about they were having some parties there, and I met this young lady, and she was from a place called Monk's Corner, South Carolina. And I remember going home and writing a letter that very night and putting it in the mailbox the next day, just telling her just how impressed I was with her. And she was an accounting major, and she was just beautiful, but she was an accounting major, and I always wanted someone who was just beautiful but had to be smart, and she was a country girl, and that just impressed me. We went on and dated for 4 years. She wouldn't marry me until I got out of college, so I finally graduated and we got married, and that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, because this young lady accepted me. I was poor at the time. Yes, I was in college, but I didn't have any money, and she accepted me, and now we've been married for about 26 years.
I met him during the summer. I don't remember the year, but I had gone home with my roommate, my college roommate, for the weekend, and we had gone out to the Holiday Inn, and so we were there, and I really believe that I remembered seeing him step off the elevator there, and I remember thinking, wow, that's a good looking guy. And I just remember thinking he just had a very distinct look about him. And I was sitting at a table with, again, my roommate and her cousin, and I think there might have been one other person there. And the way the table was arranged, I was really sitting at the end of the table, and at some point he came up and started asking the ladies at the table to dance, and I was literally at the end of the table, so he had to ask 3 people in front of me to dance, and he asked, and the first person said, no, I don't really want to dance, and then he asked the second person, and I was sitting there thinking, I sure hope nobody says they want to dance with him, because I really want to dance with him. So none of them danced, accepted to dance with him, and so he finally got to me, and I kind of jokingly said to him sometime, and I was the last person you even asked to dance, and I ended up marrying him. But I was so excited, and we actually ended up dancing the whole night, talking and dancing the whole night. And so when we left that night, I remember telling my roommate, wow, I really like this guy. And he was so different because he wasn't a guy who was talking about partying and that type of stuff. He was talking about his future, and he was talking about his family and what he wanted in life. And that was really strange, because you have to understand, you're talking about a person who's like 20, 21 years old. There was a letter that he had written me, and he talked about, how happy he was to meet me. And I was just like blown away by that that he would have gone home and written me this letter after meeting him. Dell and I got married, and our plans were to, stay in an apartment for a year and a half or so, then to move in a home, and then to start our family. And everything pretty much went as scheduled. Our first child, Calvin, was born, and he was a premature baby. He was born right at 2.5 months early. I was at Moses Cone Hospital, and he was in NICU probably closer to 2 months. And when he was born, it was very hard to be excited. We were excited, but they literally took him away from us immediately to take him into the NICU. And for anyone who doesn't know anything about having a premature child, they basically, all of their functions, he was whole in terms of he had hand, feet, and fingers and all that, but he really wasn't ready to be born, and so he was here. And we got a call, as my husband spoke, and basically it was a social worker saying they needed us to come to the hospital and talk. They wanted to talk to us about Calvin and about, where he was and how he was doing. And they felt that he had what they called a bleed. And I really do not know all the medical terms, but it's an issue in his brain, which basically would delay him. And they did speak about him not being able to walk or talk. And we basically, on the phone, she gave me a brief introduction of what it meant to have a bleed, and I was devastated. I called Dell and came home. He came home, and I just remember thinking, why my child? Why did this happen to my child? And we ended up going to the hospital. When we walked in a room, it was maybe 10 or 12 people in the room. Physicians and nurses and social workers, and it was all these people. And I remember thinking, wow, this can't be good to have all these people. And one by one, they talked to us about Calvin's condition, and basically they were preparing us for the worst, about not knowing where he would developmentally be, and they needed to run some more tests, and they needed to get our permission to do that. They proceeded to run all these tests on him to see just how bad the bleed was. And we had to basically live through the weekend not knowing what the results were. And it was very, very hard and very difficult.
Again, just that whole burden of will he live or will he die? I went down Holden Road and I made a right on the Wendover. And I was just driving on Wendover, and right when Wendover crossed Friendly, I remember saying, God, if my son has to die, please take me instead of my son. And God, if it has to be someone to die, I'm 27 years old. Let me die in my son's place. But under one caveat, God, that if I die, can I wake up in heaven in Jesus and Moses' arms? And I remember closing my eyes as I went across the bridge that crossed Friendly Avenue. And it seems like a long time. I know it was just seconds. And then I remember opening my eyes again, and I was just still driving and went to the hospital. And I think at that time I told my wife, baby, Cal was going to be okay.
And I remember going back. They called us back in the following week to speak to us, and his not his pediatrician, but his doctor, Dr. Hickling, who was a child physician, spoke to us, and what he said to us was just unbelievable. And what he said was, when they reviewed all of the tests from what they had done and taken of Calvin, it was as if nothing had happened. So he was just amazed. He was surprised. I personally was not surprised, and I don't believe Dell was surprised, because we had been praying and our family had been praying. So it was almost as if he was cured, or he was healed overnight. And there were literally no signs that this child had had this bleed. And later on that week, and within that week, all of those things that Calvin wasn't doing, he started to do. And everybody was amazed, and the nurses and everybody was just amazed. But again, I wasn't amazed because I believe God had healed him. And that was a difficult time. And by the time Calvin was 2 years old, he was fully developed as in the same, in terms of developmentally, he was doing the same things that any other 2-year-old would have done. And nobody would have believed that because of what what we were told in the beginning.
4 months later, after Calvin was born, my only father I ever knew, Papa T, died. And it was interesting that when I became a father, the only father that I ever knew died. Later on, we got pregnant again and had another son, and we named him Tecumseh, after my grandfather, Papa T. Lewis, after my wife Beverly's grandfather, Lewis Richardson. So the family was doing well. We moved on through that. And then my baby sister, Sonia Renee Cleveland Richardson, got killed in a car accident.
My Renee got killed in an automobile accident. And the way that they didn't send the preacher here, state troopers came. And they don't know how to talk. Well, they know how to talk to you. They just tell you whatever it is. Preacher might put some compassion in it and talk easily. You're at home by your... Where is Renee? Who's Sandra Cleveland? That's my daughter. Well, who is Sandra Richardson is her name because she got married. Who's Sandra Richardson? That's my daughter. Well, who's Courtney Richardson? That's her daughter. He said, but where is she? Told him she's not here.
Hello. Just want to take a quick minute, just say thank you for all the support around my new book, It's My Turn Now. As we move into the holiday season, we'll be happy to personally autograph a copy for you. What better gift in a way of acknowledging the caregiver, the person who's taking care of our loved ones, the person who's making the sacrifices. So let's give them something to support them. And again, this book, It's My Turn Now, has gotten such great reviews that we just say thank you. Just thank you to everyone who's utilizing it and just benefiting from it. I thank you, my mother thanks you, my brother, my sister, the whole family just say thank you for believing in our story and seeing how our experiences can help so many people. We have to have the order in before December the 15th to make sure that this book is sitting under your Christmas tree.